There are stories that sound so unbelievable, so fantastic, that you have to think they're made up. Today, I'm going to tell you one of those stories, and you'll have to figure out whether it's true or a lie. The 5th of August 1949 was supposed to be a routine mission for the 16 firefighters. Wagner Dodge looked through the small window of the Douglas transport plane down at the endless forests of Montana. Columns of smoke rose like dark fingers into the sky, revealing the position of the fire. His years of experience told him that this mission would be different. The pilot circled twice above the canyon before determining the optimal drop point. Dodge checked his equipment one last time and signaled his men to get ready. The parachutes opened like white blossoms against the smoke-filled sky. Below, the fire was already waiting for its new opponents. The landing went smoothly, but while gathering the equipment, Dodge noticed the unusual wind direction. The fire had doubled in size since the morning and was now devouring the dry grass with frightening speed. His men looked at him expectantly, trusting in his leadership. Time had now become the decisive factor. Dodge split his crew and assigned each man his position. The strategy was simple: cut a fire break and contain the flames before they reached the surrounding forests. Robert Sally and Walter Rumsey were tasked with securing the flank. The other 14 men were to face the fire head-on. An hour passed when Dodge suddenly noticed a disastrous change. The wind had shifted and was now driving the fire straight toward them. The flames were moving up the slope at a speed of over 30 kilometers per hour. His experience screamed at him that they had to retreat immediately. "All men back to the landing site!" Dodge shouted over the crackling of the flames. His voice broke with tension as he realized how quickly their situation was deteriorating. The men dropped their heavy equipment and ran up the steep slope. Behind them, a wall of fire and death was consuming the grassland. Henry Thole stumbled over a branch and lost precious seconds getting back up. James Harrison helped him while the heat was already scorching their necks. The group ran as a single unit, but Dodge knew they would lose the race. The fire was simply too fast, and they were too slow. When the situation seemed hopeless, Dodge made a desperate decision. He set the grass in front of him on fire, creating a burned area about 10 meters in diameter. "In here!" he shouted to his men, pointing to the still smoldering ground. His idea was brilliant. Fire could not burn where everything had already burned. Most of the men did not understand what their leader wanted from them. The trust they had built over the years vanished in the face of the seemingly insane order. They kept running up the slope toward certain death. Only Dodge lay down on the charred earth and pressed his face against the hot ground. Short break. At this point, the resolution of the last unbelievable story from Klaus, who had found an old Nazi bunker behind his neighbor's basement. Well, who guessed it? A true story or a lie? This unbelievable story is entirely made up and never happened. Now back to Dodge and the fire inferno in the mountains of Montana. Robert Sally and Walter Rumsey had held the right flank and spotted a rock crevice just in time. They threw themselves inside and pressed their bodies against the cold stone. The fire roared over them like a glowing hurricane from hell. Their lungs burned from the hot air, but they survived. 15 minutes later, it was all over. Dodge slowly rose from his improvised shelter and looked over the charred battlefield. 13 of his men were dead, consumed by the flames like sacrifices to an ancient god. Only Sally, Rumsey, and Dodge himself had survived. Years later, Wagner Dodge was questioned by a commission investigating the disaster. This wildfire went down as one of the greatest tragedies in American firefighting history. It changed wildfire training and tactics forever. New safety protocols were developed to prevent such catastrophes, but the names of the 13 fallen men remained forever part of the legend. Dodge never returned to active duty, but devoted his life to training new firefighters. He taught them the lesson he himself had been forced to learn so bitterly. The sun was already low, when the rescue teams found the charred remains of the men. Each body told its own story of the struggle against the flames. Some had tried to run, others to hide. All had succumbed to the overwhelming power of the fire. Wagner Dodge stood apart, silently watching the macabre recovery work. His hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette. The smoke painfully reminded him of the events of the day. 13 families would have no fathers or sons tonight. 1 year later, an official report on the disaster was released that fully rehabilitated Dodge's actions. The commission found that his backfire had been the only rational response to the situation. His men had not died because of his failure, but because of the unpredictable force of nature. In his later years, Wagner Dodge wrote a book on wildfire fighting and dedicated it to his fallen comrades. He described in detail the science of fire behavior and the psychology of decision-making under stress. The book became required reading for all American firefighters and probably saved countless lives. Anyone trapped by a fast-moving wildfire must immediately light a backfire and create a burn safety zone. Then lie flat on the charred earth, face down, and wait until the wall of fire passes. This paradoxical tactic had saved Dodge and continues to save countless lives to this day. On a memorial stone at the site of the disaster, the names of the 13 victims are engraved. Robert Sally returned here many years later and laid down flowers. He was one of the few survivors and carried the burden of memory until his death. Robert Sally, the last survivor of this fire disaster, died on the 26th of May, 2014. Truth or fiction? The answer comes in a few days, right here, with the next unbelievable story. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, provis. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what you think happened down there. Truth or just fiction?